Let's talk about my reading plans for 2025. I was debating if I call this video like backlist books or 25 books to read in 2025, but most of them are backlist and not all, and I don't exactly have 25. I have more than 25. I tried to make a list of 25 books to read in 2025, and I ended up with a list of over 100 books I want to prioritize in 2025, and I cannot read 100 books in 2025. So if any of the ones I mention on here, you're really excited to see me read or to hear my thoughts on, let me know, because I'll try to get around to those ones even sooner. But here's a list of books that I'm really excited about. I have this broken out into 5 genres, and then I was trying to, or 5 categories, I guess you could say. And I was trying to pick only 5 books for each category, and I'm really bad at I'm really bad at following my own arbitrary rules, and I'm just excited about all of the books. I filmed this video a month ago, and it is wild to me trying to edit this video, realizing how much my life has changed in the past month. So I still want to read every single one of these books, but I just have the problem if I want to read all of the books, and I don't have time to. Like, we are 6 weeks into the new year, and I've read like 5 books. So I need to pick up my reading pace if I plan on reading all of the books. I also work in a public library, and my role is shifting in the library. I got a promotion, and I'm really excited for what I get to do, but I'm also realizing how much my work affects my reading habits, and I will be focusing a lot on 2025 releases and reading those books this year. So I might make a follow-up video to this one talking about the 2025 books I plan on reading this year, because those are probably going to be my focus over these ones. And I hate to say that because I really want to read all of these books, but I need to pick up my reading pace. I don't have the time and mental energy to do it all. So my categories are fantasy, science fiction, historical fiction, other non-speculative fiction, and non-fiction. And I will be going through them in that order, starting with the fantasy books I'm most excited to read in 2025. So I am still reading through A Song of Ice and Fire. I am in Storm of Swords. I'm in book 3 right now, and I will be finishing A Song of Ice and Fire in 2025. In addition, I have picked another big fantasy series to dive into in 2025, and that is Malazan Book of the Fallen. I'm honestly a little surprised because I feel like my initial impression of Malazan was that it was a series I was not interested in. The fans were kind of scary and intense, and being around booktube more and hanging out in the bookish discords, actually Malazan sounds like a series I would like. So I'm going to try it. I'm at least going to try book 1 and see how it goes. If you've been following along on my channel, you might know that I absolutely loved Lost Ark Dreaming. This was a science fiction that I read this year, but this author has actually written a few fantasy books, and I want to try them because, like, his books are some of the best books that I read this year, so I should be trying more by this author. So I think the one I'm going to prioritize is David Mogo Godhunter, which is actually the one I literally never heard of. I've never heard anyone talk about this book until I looked it up and, you know, was looking at what else the author has written. I have heard of Son of the Storm, which is another book by this author, and I want to read it too, but for some reason I'm like, yeah, I want to try the less popular one first, I guess. Speaking of unpopular books, I've literally never heard anyone talk about Savage Legion, and I started Savage Legion like in 2023. No, it's only been like a year and a half ago. 2023, I started Savage Legion, and I was loving it, and then I didn't finish it. And then I never picked it back up again. And I really hate that I just like don't go back to books that I'm loving. Why do I do this? So this is the year I am reading Savage Legion. I am finding out if I want to continue with the series. That's the first book in a trilogy. If I love it, I want to read all 3 books. This is the problem sometimes with fantasy. As soon as you start naming like 25 books you want to read, you're actually naming like 100 books you want to read, even though you only said the name of 25, because so many of them are series. Another series that I want to read, but I'm pretty sure this is a short series, or it's like a series of short books, I'm pretty sure there's an audiobook for like a bind up of all of them. I have to investigate this one a little bit further, but I know I'm reading it. It is called Dark Waters. So this first came on my radar when Chadia reviewed it well in the Fantasy Network Discord, and I think a couple other people also read it and reviewed it well in there, and then someone in the Andrew Watson's Discord was also reading through it and loving it. And basically I just keep seeing this book everywhere, and it sounds like something I'm interested in. So now I have to read Darkwater next year. This year, oh my gosh, it's already 2025. I'm gonna be saying next year for a while. Yes, I'm already over 5 books for fantasy, but I'm just gonna name one more I'm really excited about. It's called The River Has Roots. This is written by one of the 2 authors who wrote This Is How You Lose the Time War. And this is a new book coming out by this author, and I was like, oh, I wanna read this because I wanna read something else by this author. And for some reason, I never even thought to look into the authors who wrote that book and find out what else they've written. And I literally came across another, I think it was a Max Gladstone book, and I was like, this sounds interesting. Why have I not looked into this author before? I think I'm really bad at reading like authors' entire catalogs, and I want to get better at it, but I also want to read like all of the authors I haven't read yet. Moving on to science fiction, one of the books in this category I am the most excited to read is Mechanize My Hands to War. I don't even think there's an audio version of this, but my library has the physical book and I plan on reading it. It sounds so good. It is about, in the near future, Appalachia, the workers, the labor force is being replaced by robots, and the people are rising up, and there's this like violent revolution going on. I don't know why it sounds so good, but I want to try it. I also want to try an Ishiguro book this year, and I'm probably going to start with Klara and the Sun. And it sounds like something I would like, so I want to give it a try. I know Ishiguro's books can be like really hit or miss with people, or they can work really well for some people and not for others, and I want to know where I land on this. And then I have 2 books that have been on my TBR literally for at least 5 years. That is Semiosis and Planetfall. It's embarrassing how long these books have been on my TBR. Sometimes I put a book on my TBR because I think I'll really like it, or I want to really like it, and then I kind of get afraid to read it because like, what if I don't like it, or what if it doesn't do for me what I think it would, or it doesn't live up to expectations. And I don't, also there's like a ton of new books that just come across my radar all the time, and I'm like, oh, this is new and shiny, and I'll just pick that up. And these 2 are also the start of series, but they sound amazing and I want to read them. A standalone, though, that's on my science fiction list is Vanished Birds, which I'm pretty sure is a science fiction. This is a Simon Jimenez book, so I read The Spear Cuts Through Water this year and loved it. The writing was gorgeous, and I'm really interested in reading other Simon Jimenez's books. And the only other one that he's written is The Vanished Birds, so obviously it'd be really easy to read this author's entire catalog just by reading this one book. And I'm pretty sure it's like fairly different from The Spear Cuts Through Water, but I'm still intrigued. I also really want to read High Rise this year. I have the audiobook, it's quite short, and it sounds a little bit similar, but also very different from Lost Ark Dreaming. It takes place in a high-rise tower, and there's like these hierarchies in like based on where you are in the tower. So I guess that's the part that's similar to Lost Ark Dreaming, though it sounds like, I'm gonna say the world, the apocalypse, whatever's going on outside of the tower is very different from Lost Ark Dreaming. And my final sci-fi book that I have that I want to get to in 2025 is Calculating Stars. So I'm not actually sure if I will like this book. And I guess, to be fair, I'm not sure if I will like any of these books, but I think I will. Calculating Stars has very mixed reviews, but I read Mercury 13 this year, and it's about the women who were trying to get into the astronaut program and go to outer space and were shut out because they were women. And apparently Calculating Stars is like a sci-fi book that's inspired by that, or somehow has that same concept in it. And I was talking about Mercury 13 with a coworker, And she said, oh, you should read Calculating Stars. She absolutely loves this book. So I think I need to read Calculating Stars now and find out if it's a book for me or not. Moving on to historical fiction. Another possibly historical fiction, possibly fantasy, maybe magical realism, alternate history. I don't know what this book is. It is You Dreamed of Empires. So I had this as an option for the first Circumnavigate read, and it was not one that was chosen, but there was a lot of discussion around this book because I classified it as fantasy because that's where I've seen it marketed. And I had several people saying that might not be the best whenever people are going into this book. If they're expecting fantasy, that might be the wrong expectations for this book, but it doesn't sound like it's strictly historical fiction either. The discussions around this book make me so much more interested in reading it. And it's very short. Like, honestly, I have no excuses. I need to read You Dreamed of Empires this year. Seriously, you have my full permission to badger me and yell at me and not leave me alone until I read You Dreamed of Empires. I also really want to read The Maniac. So this was a book in the Fantasy Network's Discord. Molly wrote a review for this book, and I honestly don't even remember what the review said, but I took a screenshot of it because I was like, that book sounds amazing. And I don't remember what it's about, but I do know it's a historical fiction that I need to read. And so I will be trying to read it in 2025. Next historical fiction is The Fountains of Silence. So I have read 2 Ruta books, and I loved one and I liked the other. And then I've not read any more of her books. And I like that she writes about historical events that are lesser known, that people might not have heard about. And like, I learn a lot whenever I read her books, and particularly whenever I read historical fiction or something that's like based on real life. I usually end up looking up the real story behind it. So obviously her books are ones that I could gain a lot from, and I just never read the rest of her books. So Fountain of Silence is the one I'm most interested in reading from her in her catalog. She has several others, and it's happening this year. I also want to read a Janet Finch book in 2025. The historical fiction book that I'm interested in reading is The Revolutions of Marina M. It is a historical fiction that takes place during the Russian Revolution, and I found out about this book because Cam talked about it on his channel. I'll have that linked below. I already had on my TBR, I'm gonna say, is it White Oleander? I don't know if that's how you say the name of it. It's a coming of age story of someone growing up in the foster care system, and I really want to read that one. That one I believe is a contemporary, so one of those, maybe both of them, I will read in 2025. And now for other non-speculative fiction books I want to read. So I was trying to introduce Han Kang and saying that I want to read her books, and I said she was the Newbery Award-winning author when she is the Nobel Prize in Literature award-winning author. Those are quite different. The book I'm most interested whenever I looked up originally, like the book she had out in English, is Human Acts. Though more books of hers are being translated into English and being published this year, and I am going to be reading We Do Not Part with Page Turners with Katya on her Reading the Globe challenge. So that one's one I will be reading this year, and I also want to read Human Acts because I want to read a couple books by this author and like really get a feel for the types of books that they write and see if I want to continue reading more of them. Okay, I also want to read Split Tooth. This has been on my TBR for probably not that long. I think since maybe October-ish. So I got a picture book out from the library. The picture book was written by a Native American, and there were some words in it, and I don't remember the language, but it was in an indigenous language in the picture book. And there was a part in the book that said to go to the author's website, and there's a video of the author reading the picture book aloud. And I went to the author's website and listened along as I read the picture book, and then found out what other book she wrote, and she wrote an adult, I'm going to call it maybe a hard-hitting contemporary. And every time I look up about this book or I look at reviews for this book, it sounds really interesting, but I'm not like 100% sure what it's about. I want to read it though. Next I have Hurricane Summer. So this one, I might try to read both books by this author. This was one I learned about because of Ashley on her channel, Bookish Realm. She now posts on the channel Realm of Kid, Lit, and Comics, but she talked about Songs of Erie, and I thought that one sounded interesting, so I looked into it, and I'm maybe more interested in Hurricane Summer, but I want to read both of them. I believe Hurricane Summer is about a girl whose parents are divorced and she's living with one of the parents just for the summer, who lives in Jamaica, and there's like a hurricane coming in, and she's like, it's a story of self-discovery and, you know, her connecting with her culture and figuring out who she is. So I'm very interested in that one. I was also recommended The Corpse Exhibition by someone in my Discord, and I decided to read it because it sounds terrible and dark and interesting. So it is about the horrors of war, and I believe it's like a short story collection. I don't think it's a full novel. And this book is written about the Iraqi war from an author in Iraq. So I feel like this is going to be like a really interesting perspective. This also reminds me, I want to read the book At Night All Blood is Black, which also sounds like a dark, terrible story about war. And for some reason, I want to read dark, terrible stories about war on possibly a slightly lighter note. I'm not actually sure. I want to read Wolf at the Table. This is totally a cover browse. I was like browsing at the library and I found this book and I was like, I'm intrigued, and then I flipped it open and read about it, and I'm trying to remember exactly what the story is, but I think it's kind of like a crime family drama. Not like a crime family, but like a crime drama and a family drama where the person who's responsible for the crimes is one of the members of the family, and like basically dealing with when people in your family are the ones causing the problems. I don't know, it sounds interesting. I've seen some very mixed reviews. Some people think it drags on too long, but that's not necessarily a red flag for me whenever I'm choosing books. I don't know, I'm curious. And again, I'm talking about way more than 5 books in this category, but one more, that is Prophet Song. So apparently this is like a really well-known one, but this was also one I found browsing. This one is set in like dystopian Ireland, where this woman's husband is a scientist, and the officials come to her door because they want to question him. And then somewhere in the story, both her husband and her oldest son disappear, and basically she is watching the world as she knew it crumbling around her and having to deal with that and figure out how to deal with that. And it just sounds very interesting. I like human stories where people are going through really hard things and you having to make like really, really difficult decisions, and some of those stories can be the best. So yeah, I mean, all of these, maybe all of my non-speculative fiction books kind of sound like rough reads, but I also, I don't know, I'll see. I'm hoping they're good. I'm hoping I like them. Okay, and finally, nonfiction. My book of the year for 2024 is a nonfiction book, and it's very outside of the types of books that I typically read. And that author has written 2 other books. So I read Wild New World. It's my book of the year for 2024. It's completely changed my life. If you want to hear more about that, I've actually talked about it in several videos. I think I talk about it the most in the browsing tag, or like the books that have had like big impact, lasting impact on me. And then I also talk about it in my awards video, so I'll have those linked. But he's written 2 other books. So he wrote Coyote America, which actually my partner read, and it was his book of the year in 2023, and I was still not able to be convinced to read that book and thought it sounded boring. And honestly, I still think it sounds like my least interesting book that this author has written. but I want to give it a try because who knows, maybe I'll love it. And then his most recent book is American Serengeti, which I also want to read. I also have some outer space books I want to read. So as I said, I read the Mercury 13 this year, and I know there's a book published called The Six, which are about the first 6 women in space. And I feel like that would be a really good follow-up to Mercury 13. And yeah, I should be reading that one. Like, I've known about that one. It's been on my radar for a while, basically since it came out. But since I just read Mercury 13, I feel like now's the time. And I also want to read Too Far From Home. So I've literally never heard anyone talk about this story before, and it sounds amazing. So this book is about after the Challenger and Columbia disasters, NASA ground spaceflight until they could figure out how to make spaceflight safer. But we literally had 2 astronauts on the International Space Station who did not have a ride home, were waiting for a shuttle to fly up to them to bring them back home. So we have 2 astronauts. It's about their time being stuck on the International Space Station. And this story is exciting for me for multiple reasons. But I discovered this book because my library does a reading challenge every year, and one of the reading prompts is a book that is set in a locked room. And I was looking for books that fit that category. And I was like, we have 2 astronauts stuck on the International Space Station right now. Maybe there's a story about that. Because like, whenever that was happening, I was like literally looking up, like, has this ever happened before? The answer is yes. And yeah, I want to read about it. And then the other books I want to read are all dinosaur books, because the thing that I absolutely love the most about Wild New World is, like, I am now super duper interested in like prehistory and natural history and dinosaurs. And basically everyone in Andrew Watson's Discord, and by basically everyone I mean Ross from Hardy's Books and Charlie from Charlie Reads a Book, is going to be reading or is currently reading The Rise and Fall of the Dinosaurs, and I am really interested in getting to that book. That same author has also written The Rise and Reign of the Mammals. So if I love the dinosaurs one, I want to read the mammals one too. I also want to read The Fossil Hunter, which is a story about Mary Anning. So apparently, like, Mary Anning's like really important in some of the discoveries we made. Like, as a young girl, she was finding fossils, and she was literally like finding fossils and then like selling them, and it's like part of how she made money. And she also like never really became wealthy or famous in her time, but she also made some very important fossil discoveries that were really important to the scientific community, and I want to learn more about her. I also want to read The Dinosaur Artist, which kind of sounds like a true crime book about fossils. It's about like the fossil trade, or like the sale of fossils, and you know how they're sold globally, and there's certain countries that like you're not allowed to sell fossils from there, but some people still try to do that, and that's what that book's about, and it sounds interesting. And I also want to read Dinosaurs at the Dinner Table, which is about these like eclectic Victorian people who accidentally discover like really important scientific discoveries, you know, fossils and dinosaur bones. So yeah, I want to read all the dinosaur books this year. So those are some of the books I'm super excited to read in 2025. If there's any of those that sound the most interesting to you, let me know in the comments, and I will try to prioritize those ones. And let me know what some books are that you are looking forward to reading in 2025. And I'll see you in another video. Happy reading!